What's up, guys? So today I'm doing part 2 and I'm going to reveal new information on the exploding pagers in Lebanon story. On the 17th, if you're following my blog over on I2P or also over on the ClearNet, I also have a blog at buymeacoffee.com/politictech. It's free to read, but if you decide to support it with a membership, you can also do that. And if you do so, you get posts, some of which I don't want AI scraping. Israel, according to the New York Times, has said that Israel didn't actually tamper with the pagers, it actually made them. And that is exactly what I theorized based on what we knew in the very early hours of the attack. I talked about this on September 17th, that's when I introduced the story, and I theorized that they were intercepted between the factory at some point and the delivery location. And that makes the most sense, and the reason it makes the most sense is because if they were individually tampered with, that would be extremely time consuming. You have to imagine that if they get delivered somewhere to individuals, they'd have to go into their place of residence or otherwise, and they'd have to find a way to tamper with it. It just doesn't make sense. The New York Times has reported on this as well, and apparently Israeli spies behind a Hungarian firm, BAC Consulting, and this is coming to you straight from the Times of Israel. If you note the address at the top, I'm actually using the I2P browser setup for this. According to the report in the New York Times, a Hungarian firm apparently supplied the pagers that was used by Hezbollah, and it was secretly set up. According to the Times of Israel, this Hungarian firm was set up by Israeli spies, and we're going to learn more about this Hungarian firm in just a moment. So it was part of a wider operation that culminated this week, but it was in a long-term planning. In fact, this Hungarian firm and also a Bulgarian firm were both started in 2022. So this has been a long time in the making, and we're going to go more into this, but I'm going to go into how I believe these pagers were designed, and also according to some information that's out there as well. And it does look like, as I reported on the 17th, that there was some change to the battery, and that is a discrete way that they could have been modified when you think about it. When you go and take a look at the inside of the pager, you have the board here. So you have this that does all the work, and then you have two batteries here. So this pager came with two batteries. Now, what would be the way that could be hidden? But let's go ahead and see what this video has to say, and it's exactly similar to how I reported on it. So what I believed on the 17th, what I said was I believed the battery could have been modified to have explosives in it, and what that does is it actually prevents it from being inspected. When you think about it, batteries, you're not supposed to open them. So they have this tight wrapping that is not see-through, so you can't see what's inside it. But you also have to keep in mind that there's weights to everything, and when things go and are scanned and are delivered, they're supposed to have a certain weight. So how would you fit something in there without x-rays picking it up? Well, if the battery itself came that way.
If it were part of a spy agency, we might consider disguising one of the two identical batteries for a different purpose. One battery would
So one battery here, this one battery would be a normal battery, and that would be enough to power the pager and make it appear to be working fine. And then the other battery would have an explosive in it, weighed out to be the same weight as it originally held. So you had two batteries, and the one had explosives, the other one was a normal battery. Just enough to power it on, just enough to prevent anyone from being tipped off on it. And apparently the walkie-talkies were also bought around the same time. And according to 3 unnamed intelligence officers, they reported that BAC Consulting, which we're about to look into, was part of a front set up by figures in Israeli intelligence. So, if you read anything about real-world stories of spying and whatnot, and in fact, if you have an interest in learning more about, Israel's Mossad agency, there's a great book. I actually have it. It's called By Way of Deception. It's by a guy named Victor Ostrovsky, and this book was actually temporarily banned in the US. So it's good. It's good. If a book gets banned because of what it holds, it might be a good book. It might have some really good information. So you can kind of learn some of the ins and outs of how these kinds of operations work. And this isn't just Israel. This is how, intelligence agencies across the world work. they have abilities and they have ways to, get those packages before they arrive and to replace them, which is what I believe happened. So let's take another clip here and listen to this.
The New York Times reporting Israeli agents planted explosives in each pager, along with a remote trigger switch.
So they planted the explosives in the pager. As mentioned, I do believe, as I originally reported, that it was related to the battery, hidden inside the battery, because of course, if someone is running a group like Hezbollah, some kind of whatever you call that group, a militia, a terrorist unit, they're going to inspect their hardware, especially their communications hardware. I mean, they would have to be stupid not to. So it had to be hidden inside the battery, or somewhere that wouldn't be ripped open. And you're not going to rip open a lithium battery unless you like catching on fire. So obviously the battery is the most logical place to hide that explosive.
According to two officials briefed. Two sources tell the Times the pagers received messages that...
So these pagers received messages that seem to be from Hezbollah leadership. And when you think about it, if these kinds of bombs can be put in our electronic devices before they reach us, I mean, obviously, this was targeted towards, what they were saying was it was targeted towards terrorists. But even so, if there's that ability to intercept things before they reach you, and for those things to be modified to have a bug or something that's going to just do mass surveillance, what's stopping anyone from doing that? Nothing. It just shows how insecure the supply chain is.
Seem to be from Hezbollah leadership.
This is a flashback story, so I pulled this up because this actually directly relates, and apparently this was one of the chief bomb makers for Hamas. Now, he earned the nickname the Engineer. He had a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, and apparently he helped with explosives, where he made explosive materials for Hamas. And what happened is he actually got killed in a similar attack. Now, he was killed by Israeli Shin Bet in 1996 following a manhunt. So what they were able to do was compromise one of his people. So the people close to them. Now, in any intelligence operation, they're going to try and compromise people in one way or another, or at least get them to do their bidding. And sometimes it's unwittingly. They may not realize it. For example, what they did appear here is give him a cell phone that was full of explosives. Does that mean that the person who gave him that phone knew the explosives were in it? It's a early cell phone bomb attack. So this is like probably what gave the idea, I'm sure, because it's, an Israeli Shin Bet assassination. But in this case, apparently they had compromised one of his people, and that caused that guy to give him a cell phone full of explosives, blew him up, and that was the end of him. So that's where it all started. Now, when we take a look at another story, here's the New York Times story itself. So, by all appearances, the BAC Consulting was a Hungary-based company. Now, here's how it was set up. This was a company that had a building, and this building is this one right here. This is the head office of BAC Consulting. According to different reports, the only person who ever visited there, and the building's empty, by the way. And the other company, the Bulgarian company, which was also involved in this, and we're going to get to that next, so just hang on and I'll introduce some information on that. Now, it appears that both company buildings were empty, so these are obviously shell companies, similar to what was mentioned in the Times of Israel. They mentioned that they were shell companies, that these companies, both the Bulgarian and the Hungarian, it looks like there was many layers to this operation, that this operation wasn't just done by some undercover agents. This was actually in I would say, years of planning before this came to be. And both buildings where the company was, the Bulgarian one had 200 different companies at that building. And the only person who ever showed up, according to reliable reporting, was a lawyer, a single lawyer. And a lawyer established the company. So obviously shell companies, that's how that happens. A lawyer may set it up. You may never actually get the people that actually are ultimately behind it. And apparently some money was transferred from the Middle East from an unnamed country. We don't really know exactly which country, but we could probably take a couple guesses on that one. So, of course, there's intelligence gathering all along. So you're seeing what's happening, the discussions that are happening behind the scenes with Hezbollah. And in this case, they're hearing information, they're possibly even feeding information, possibly what's called tickling the line. And tickling the line is a common term in like FBI investigations. You hear about it if you ever watch a mafia documentary. Tickling the line is where they have, surveillance or a tap on a phone, and what they do is they try to plant and feed information to get people talking. And what may have happened here is they may have tickled the line and talked about the dangers of Pegasus, which is an obvious Israeli spy program for your phone, so a remote administration tool. And so eventually somehow they were talked into abandoning cell phones altogether, and that is, more private. Of course, a pager is a receiver. It's going to be a more private device. It's not going to be giving off the same identifiers as, say, a cell phone, for example. So it's a quiet device. And in that way, it seemed like the right solution. They thought it was the right solution, but shipments of the pagers increased. And I'm sure they were picking up on that as well. They wondered what the shipments of these pagers were doing, and they offered encrypted pagers. So they probably somehow sold it between people who may have been compromised on the inside, or maybe just feeding information on the street that got people to think this was a secure solution, this was something they could rely on. And it looks like they had a trigger to send the beep and a message. And this is similar to how I reported on the 17th. How it was either, in my theory then, I talked about how it was either programmed to go off when it got a page from the leader of Hezbollah. And that would be smart as well, in that it would go off when someone who worked for him was likely holding it. Because if it wouldn't go off for any other page, for example, it wouldn't go off for someone's family, but it would only go off with Hezbollah leadership, leading us to believe that something like that would only target, or at least more narrowly target, those. But of course, like I mentioned, I'm not trying to get around the fact that there were innocent people injured. Of course, I mean, that is horrific, and I'm not saying this is a good thing at all. I'm simply reporting on this historic event because it's definitely related in that we're talking technology. And what it caused, the implications, the ultimate effect here. One of the biggest effects is the psychological. It put Lebanon into total chaos. And this is the type of operation you would think could happen before a major missile strike. Because the first thing that happens in war, strategically, they want to take out communications first. And so taking out the pagers, taking out and wounding the people instead of killing them, it just makes more people. Like, I have family who are in Vietnam. They said, what they really want to do is they want to wound you, because, like my family member in Vietnam said, you actually end up using a lot more resources when you have someone wounded instead of killed, because when they're killed, you can simply drag, or carry the body. And when they're wounded, you have to care for them. You need several people to do that. So people are freaking out after this, and they're going through the streets, and they're even scared. It's kind of sad, because the way it affected innocent people, like Fatima Abdullah. So one little girl came home from her first day of school. She heard her father's pager beep. She brought it to him, and it exploded, killing her. There was other people who shouted, "Turn off your phone, take out the battery." And so people were freaking out. Obviously this girl's family was freaking out, because she unfortunately was trying to bring her father the pager, and it exploded and killing her. 9 years old. Very sad there. But, the psychological effect, that's really what is the big effect of this. This is going to make, fear of any technology. If the supply chain's compromised, what can you trust? So the design and manufacturing of the products were handled entirely by BAC, according to the company themselves. So Gold Apollo is the company that actually was the brand name of the pagers. And what they did was they actually sold the licensing to a company called BAC Consulting. We can go back to this right here. And according to this in the New York Times, they said that, official but Anonymous, unnamed intelligence officers said that BAC Consulting was part of a front set up by Israeli intelligence. Okay, interesting. So apparently they say they were designed and manufactured by BAC. Well, on the other hand, BAC is saying they never manufactured anything. So you're getting a lot of running around in circles, a lot of things that you can't be sure, who is doing what. There's so many different parties, so many different shell companies. It's hard to pinpoint who exactly is behind this attack. So, a Hungarian media outlet also reported there was actually a company called Norda Global. So, Norda Global was based in Bulgaria, and I briefly mentioned that earlier. This was a Bulgarian company that was owned by a Norwegian citizen who happened to be an Indian. So I believe he was born, Indian born, that's what I meant to say. Indian born Norwegian citizen who owned this company. So there's a couple different front companies that appear to have at least some connection. I'm not saying they're behind it. I'm simply reporting the news as it's been reported. But I thought you guys might find this interesting, just a little behind the scenes on what could have happened in this attack. Now, what's interesting is this particular individual, they can't find him. Ever since the day of the attack, he disappeared. His own family can't find him. And also, in addition to that, well, he happens to be involved with something called Founders Nation, which apparently has connections to Israeli startups. Does that mean that he knew what he was getting into? No, it doesn't. Like I said, all of the people mentioned today could be completely oblivious, unwitting participants. And that's how these kinds of things can happen. And I'm just going by my reporting. I've never worked for the government. I don't have inside information there. But what I do know is, these kinds of things happen to work a certain pattern. Shell companies, forged passports. They did mention that the CEO is one person who's actually in hiding right now. Now, this person who's the CEO, Christiana, she said she's only a trading intermediary. But the interesting thing about it is just we saw is that Apollo licensed BAC Consulting to do the manufacturing. So what is the real truth behind this? And even as mentioned, the New York Times cited 3 intelligence officers that Budapest-based company was actually part of an Israeli front. And at the same time, we also have another person involved in this. We can see a short biography of Eric Hansen. Is it even a real person? These days with artificial intelligence and all of the other things that are going on with, and I did a report on, AI bots and our AI bot future, deep fake world. Check that out if you haven't yet. And we see a short biography of Eric Hansen, who's apparently the firm's business manager. Well, is this guy even real? When you look into him, and that's what I'm getting at with the AI deepfake bots, this person has a LinkedIn profile, says he worked for BAC Consulting, but at the same time, doesn't have any photos, says he's based in Denmark, but at the same time, it's a copy of someone else's LinkedIn. In fact, this PDC consultancy that they say he worked for. So they found no real link between Eric Hansen and PDC consultancy. So is he really involved with it? And there's other interesting things with that Christiana person. She apparently said she had involvement in different things, and they said she wasn't a member of the board. Well, she claimed she was a member of the board. So there's a lot of interesting things in this story. Now, Christiana's mother of BAC Consulting, she's the CEO. She apparently has a lot of different types of jobs. Here she is right here. She apparently has worked in all different places, from physics to atomic and nuclear energy related. So she has an interesting work history. And apparently she's from Sicily, so she's from Italy. And like I said, I don't know if she has any involvement, but I'm reporting on the news here. And apparently she's being protected right now because of saying that she felt threatened after the attack. Apparently she's in hiding. That's her mother. And she was told not to talk to the press. And people report that she could not have known. So, did she know? We really don't know if she knew at all. The fact of the matter is, we don't know if she knew at all, but this is the original site. What's interesting is both of those appearing to be shell companies, both of their sites went down after the attack. Why is that? Why did the sites go down? You would think if there was no involvement that you would want to leave the site up. But I have no idea if she had anything to do with it or even knew anything about it. But she's interested in humanitarian and social action programs with extensive competencies in the nonprofit sectors. So you can find some, artifacts of her previous. She also worked at UNESCO, at the International Atomic Energy Agency. So she has a lot of different interests here. Now, we did just look at this. This is that building again. She won't respond to any messages for comment. Neighbors haven't seen her. So as mentioned, as it was reported, she's under the protection of Hungarian intelligence. Here is another person who is connected to the story. So remember how I talked about the Bulgarian company, the other building that never had a visitor at any point and only had a lawyer that would show up every once in a while? Well, Indian-born entrepreneur Rinsen Jose was listed as the owner of this Bulgarian shell company. What's interesting is he's also missing. So you cannot find him. They're looking for him around the world right now. So a lot of different police and intelligence agencies appear to be looking for him because he has not been around since the day of the attack. He's also part of that, connection. There were two different companies between the original Apollo company in Taiwan and the Final Destination. Money was changed hands with the Indian-born Rinsen Jose. So he was linked to this. So apparently this is another, sighting on X or Twitter. And apparently a emergency session. So the contract was officially signed between BAC Consulting and Gold Apollo and his company, Rinsen, the guy who's missing, Norta Global, is down. His website is also down. So every company in between the Taiwan one and the destination appears to be down. And the people nobody can find him. His own family can't even find him at this time. So even before this, according to this report, that even before Hezbollah decided to expand the pager uses, Israel already had a plan to establish a shell company to pose as an international pager producer, BAC. So that was 2022. So as you can tell, it's been at least a couple years in the making. If this is accurate, if the intelligence sources at the New York Times are telling the truth, which I assume they would be, same with the Times of Israel. And this is probably much more common than you might think in the supply chain, where, if they are intercepting people's packages and they are replacing them with bugged devices, well, of course they've got a factory for that. Of course they are making identical models in every way, every look, every bit of it. Does make you wonder now. Think about this. Why can't you remove the batteries in modern day phones? That's a good question, given what we know about this attack, given that the battery had the hidden stuff in it. Wonder what might be in the batteries. That's just some conspiracy stuff, but, it does make you wonder, why did they make batteries unremovable in the most recent phones? And why is he missing? Why is she in hiding? I believe she said it was because she felt threatened. But what about him? Nobody's even talked to him. I hope he's okay. So Jose has a similar background, it seems, to the other person behind BAC Consulting. So remember, Jose has the Bulgarian company. Both of these, the Hungarian company and the Bulgarian company, are both connected. And the BAC Consulting is the only one that had the licensing from Gold Apollo. But at some point, you had this Indian-born gentleman involved at some point, and he was also working with, or at least a part of the website that linked people to Israeli startups. So could he have more involvement? Could Christiana be completely innocent? Very well, she could be. All of these people could be innocent. And that's the funny thing about this world of, intel operations, where you really don't know what is what, and that's the whole idea. Plausible deniability. So everyone here, it seems, could have some form of plausible deniability, at least the people that actually are in the public eye, the people you can find, because who knows who actually manufactured these devices. And this is the website of Rinson, the Indian-born entrepreneur who was connected to Norta Global, which is this website here, which was taken down after the attack. So Bruce Schneier actually has a great blog. So if you are not familiar, he was part of the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and he talks also about this pager attack. And the real threat is to our supply chain. When we live in an age where we can't even remove our smartphone batteries, should we be worried about what's in those batteries? When we see that the batteries carried the payload for these exploding pagers, could there be snooping devices? I don't think there's explosives in our phone batteries, but could there be snooping devices? And why can't you remove the battery? That is a question we should be able to answer. Why can't we remove our smartphone batteries? Especially when we know that in the supply chain, people are intercepting packages and replacing identical phones with those that have something insidious inside. That's what I got today, guys. Make sure to follow over at the blog. You can check me out over at righttoprivacy.i2p on the I2P network. You can also check out over on Privacy Tech Tips at bmc.link/politictech, and then just hit post. You can read all the public posts there, and if you support this channel, you can actually get access to additional posts that I don't want scraped by AI. And sometimes there are completely original tips that aren't published anywhere else. Personally, concepts that I've come up with, and I like to share all that stuff with you guys, and I make everything possible public eventually. Sometimes a post will come out and be shared as a thank you, and then later on it'll come out and be shared publicly with everyone. And that's usually how I do it. I share early content with those who support this, and then I eventually edit it up into a public video. And if you want to support this, you can go check out the commission section where you can actually buy a Core Boot laptop with Intel neutered, no problems with the battery. So nothing like the story we had today, thank goodness. And you can get something you can actually trust, something that's not going to violate your security and privacy. So guys, make sure to like, share the video, subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think happened? How do you think this went down? Do you think this report's accurate? Do you think they knew more than they're leading on? Why do you think they disappeared? Why can't, we reach them? And why did the websites go down the day of the attack? And why can't we remove our smartphone batteries? That's something we need to be asking ourselves with this supply chain incident, this historic incident. We need to know why we can't remove our smartphone batteries, because if you consider this attack, how it happened, and how there could be swapped out batteries for spyware hidden inside the battery, who's to say there's not something else? That's what I got today, guys. Make sure to like, share the video. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. If you want to reach me, you can write an email at righttoprivacy@tutnoda.com and righttoprivacy@i2pmail.org, and even more privately, internally on I2P Mail's SUSI system, which is righttoprivacy@mail.i2p. And I will be back later with more analysis, reporting, and also tips on how to protect your security and privacy.